Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here today with you. I hope you enjoy this brief lecture on Russia and the global south. And thanks again to the Moroccan Institute for the Global South for the invitation. And I hope we can keep working together on the future. Well, as I had said before, I will be talking on Russia and the global south. It's not expected to be a very deep. It's more an exploratory view and not very deep because of the time we have. And first, I would like to start with this. Russia has increased its engagement with the global south under Vladimir Putin's leadership, especially in the last years, as its international isolation grew due to the war with Ukraine. And the research question is in what ways has Russia engaged in with the global south? The first thing I wanted to speak a little bit, it's about what is the global south. I know this whole uh, talkings, the conference is focused on the anniversary of the Bandung Conference in 1955. So I wanted to take or I will stick to the global south definition from the UNDP report from 2004. Uh, they said like the use of the term south to refer to developing countries collectively has been part of international relations vocabulary since the 1970s. So first thing is not, even though in the last years or in the 21st century, the global south concept or term has been used like more often, it's not a new concept. And the thing about global south is that it rested on the fact that all industrially developed countries lied on the north of the world and developing countries lied on the south. But now we know like we can find a global south in the north and uh, north in the global south. So it's not just a geography definition or geographic concept, but this idea of the characteristics that a group of countries share. And well, and when we talk about the global south, it includes countries from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and the Pacific Islands. So it differs, for example, like how many countries that the global south has. I took the G77 group that currently has a 134 members. And I wanted to compare this because when we talk about Russia and the global south, first, Russia doesn't directly speak on global south on official documents. And here we have two examples. For the first one, a report from 2 years ago from the Higher School of Economics in Russia. They made this report for the government, Russia's policy toward the world majority. So in Russia's case, it's not talking about global south, but it's talking about world majority. And they define world majority as a community of non-Western countries that have non-binding relationships with the United States and the organization it patronizes. So first they define that as the world majority, a very wide concept actually, and even they say they need to work more on it to clarify it or make it more clear. And then in the same document they add the fact that politically Russia is part of the world majority doesn't mean that it's comprised in the global south or it is full part of it. In geographical, geoeconomic, geocultural, climatic, and other senses, Russia remains a northern country. So I think this kind of catch my attention because uh, when we talk about global south, we talk about these characteristics like developing countries struggling with different poverty, lack of capacity, maybe not very strong institutions. And the fact that Russia separates itself at this point from the global south just in geographic term or even climatic, geoeconomic or climatic things, it's like maybe they didn't understand the concept of what is global south. It seems to me like that. So then I wanted to start, or the idea of this presentation started with the point that how the relations with the global south had changed from 2022 with the Russia invasion of Ukraine. So what I found out is like Russia has been working with countries of the global south along the 21st century. And the first thing, we have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It was founded in 2001. And, like China, originally there were just six countries: China, Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. And along the way, other countries like India, Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan, as an observer country, had joined this organization. And then we have the starting point of Russia working with the world in 2007, when it was released the concept of Russian development policy. So at this point, Russia, finally, between 2006 2008, Russian economy finally stabilized, started growing with the high oil prices. So this allowed Russia to insert to the international community and start like linking and working with other regions and countries again in a more active way. So we have then in 2009 the BRICS, and then we can jump to 2023 with the BRICS Plus, and we know Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia have joined. Originally, some other countries, for example, from Latin America, were supposed to join, but at the end, they didn't do it. So Russia has been working on bilateral terms, but as you can see, also on multilateral and regional terms. For example, since 2015, Russia has been working with the Latin America community, the CELAC, that is the Community of Latin America and Caribbean States. And from 2019, with Africa at the well, there are different forums, but the one that is maybe more known is the Africa Summit, and the first one was held in 2019. So here we have the background, and I wanted to go to the 2007 year and the concept of Russian development, because when Russia wanted to insert to the international community and link with the West, we know at the G7 that it turned to G8. It applied for the World Trade Organization, and it also applied to be part of the OECD. And then from 2011 to 2021, Russia reported its ODA to the OECD. And it was after the Russian invasion of Ukraine that the OECD suspended Russia's participation in the organization. So there is no information about it. Like, for example, if the ODA flows just stop, or they just not even reported to the OECD. One of the features of Russia's ODA was the forgiveness to developing countries, and it has been like the biggest chunk of Russia's ODA with the world. And for example, since the year 2000, Russia has written off the debt of many of its debtor countries. The biggest example is Cuba. In 2014, Russia forgave like around 35 billion of Cuban debt. And then in a very symbolic or like matching the energy with the Africa Summit held at Sochi in Africa Russia Summit at Sochi in 2019. Well, Russia forgave 20 billion USD of debt to Africa. So this we can take it as a background, and well, this is just an idea. I wanted when I start thinking about it, I wanted to focus on. Or I just thought, okay, how does Russia like helps the global south in terms of development, in terms of humanitarian help, and this just came up. But what I found out is there are different ways that Russia can relate with the global south. That is not just regarding like with official assistance for development or international cooperation or funding, that kind of stuff. So here we have like as I mentioned before, the different ways or the different sectors, areas where Russia ODA splits. And as we can see, the debt forgiveness is by far the biggest one with around 60%. And then we have the country programmable aid with around 30%. And as you can see, for example, Russia doesn't fund or doesn't do funding for NGOs, which is 0%, and it has also an important chunk on humanitarian and food aid, around 10-11%. So now we go to 2023, and we have the latest concept of foreign policy of Russia. And as we can see in the document, Russia doesn't talk, or it is not mentioned, the global south or world majority. So what we can see is that Russia approaches by region, but not as a whole or collectively. For example, in this document, you can see it mentions the Eurasian continent, and then Eurasia it's like divided in sub-regions or smaller regions. For example, well, the first countries that it mentions is India and China, and then goes to the Asia Pacific region and mentions ASEAN, and then it goes to Islamic world, and it mentions some countries that we are going to go a little bit later. It goes to Africa. It doesn't mention any country in particular. And then it goes to Latin America and the Caribbean, and it doesn't mention any country in particular. So now we're going to review the official information that the Concept Foreign Policy has, the latest one, 2023. And there are some things that, for example, the first point for Africa, it mentions like energy security, military and military technical cooperation. So we're gonna see that for Africa and Latin America, but not for Middle East, or it doesn't mention Middle East. It mentions the Islamic world. So it changed from geography to say Latin America and the Caribbean, Africa, Asia Pacific and ASEAN, and then comes with the Islamic world as an idea, because it mentions also, well, you have like Northern Africa, you have Middle East, and even the Southeast Asia, where you can find the Islamic world. So for Africa, we have supporting the sovereignty and independence of interested African states, including through security assistance, inter alia food and energy security, as well as military and military technical cooperation. Then it has assistance in resolving and overcoming the consequences of armed conflicts in Africa, especially inter-ethnic and ethnic ones, advocating the leading role of African states, and then goes to the African problems, African solutions, arguing the non-interference of other huge powers, of big powers. Then strengthening and deepening Russian-African cooperation in various spheres on bilateral and multilateral basis. For example, the African Union and the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum, and we could add here the Russia-Africa Summit. Another goal is to increase trade and investment with African states, and later we'll see how it's going on. Finally, promoting and developing links in the humanitarian sphere, scientific cooperation, training or national personnel, strengthening health systems, providing other kind of assistance, and promoting intercultural dialogue, and protecting traditional, spiritual, and moral values, and the right to freedom of religion. So it seems like a very important feature, at least for in Africa. And then we have Latin America, supporting interested Latin American states. They say, well, they know Latin America is divided between, for example, US allies and maybe China or closer to Russia states. So that's why they mention interested Latin American states under pressure from the United States, like Nicaragua, Cuba, or Venezuela, and its allies, including through promotion and expansion of security, military, and military technical cooperation. Then we have strengthening friendship, mutual understanding, and deepening multifaceted, mutually beneficial partnerships. And it mentions specific countries like Brazil, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and other countries in the region. And also it's very important that mentions the regional characteristic or the regional feature, mentioning the most important or most relevant regional organizations in Latin America, like CELAC, which CELAC has a CELAC Russia Summit, Mercosur, which is the Common Market, South Common Market, SICA for Central America, ALBA for Bolivarian countries like Venezuela and Bolivia, and CARICOM for the Caribbean, and the Pacific Alliance, that it's maybe the most conservative and more aligned to the U.S. Regional Trade Organization in Latin America, which is it has 4 members: Mexico, Colombia, and Peru, and Chile. For example, Colombia, Peru, and these 4 countries had linked to more neoliberal politics. They have close relationships with United States. So while the Mercosur or ALBA, CARICOM try to be more independent, well, the Pacific Alliance countries are very close to the US. And finally, expanding cultural, scientific, educational, sports, tourism, and other humanitarian ties with the states of the region. And then we have the Islamic world. They focus on deepening bilateral relations with the OIC members, especially Iran, Syria, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. And then establishing a regional security and cooperation architecture, supporting interfaith and intercultural dialogue, helping and overcome consequences of armed conflicts in the Middle East, North Africa, Southeast Asia, and other regions where member states of the OIC are located. And finally, they mention like the economic potential, or to increase economic cooperation between Russia and the Islamic world, either in the Middle East, Northern Africa, or Southeast Asia. And what I notice here that they doesn't mention any military cooperation, even though Egypt is one of the main buyers for Russian arms sales, but they do not mention with the Islamic world military agreements or military cooperation. And then I would like to go to the conclusions and then come back to some examples. First, we can conclude that Russia has been working with the Global South since the second half of 2000s, and we don't see it explicitly mentioned like, oh yes, the Global South, but it has been working with the different regions for a while. Second, one way to engage with the Global South is through regional forums like CELAC, Russia-Africa Summit, or ASEAN, or the Organization or of Islamic Conference. And the third one, and maybe the most important, one of Russia's main obstacles or main difficulties for engaging with the Global South, it is its limited resources. Actually, what we can conclude about how Russia engages or links with the world, it's compared, for example, with United States or China. Russia has very small economy compared with these two countries, or even Germany, Japan. It's similar to South Korea, for example. So in terms of economics, like uh, funding, financing, trading, Russia doesn't have these big powers as China, this big power as China or the United States. So um, there's a lot of discourse, especially from 2022 after the Ukraine invasion, and Russia has been more vocal about cooperating or engaging with the global south. And as examples, we have the summits with Africa, the summit with BRICS, the summit with the Islamic world, that they actually, between 2022, around three or four big summits with Africa, with BRICS, with Islamic world, with the free world, have taken part in Russia, and a lot of commitments are made there, but it has been very difficult for Russia to translate these commitments or these ideas into projects, rather trade, economic, scientific, or humanitarian cooperation. And here we have a couple of examples. One of the ways in how Russia engaging with the global south is through energy, either oil or nuclear energy. We know that India and China right now are the main buyers of Russian oil, and but we know like also for Latin America and other countries in Southeast Asia, well, Russia is also a seller, maybe not the first partner, but it's a seller or of oil. Then we have nuclear energy. For example, Argentina has an agreement, and 12 countries of Africa have a nuclear cooperation agreement with Russia. We know that Russia is one of the biggest wheat producers in the world, also with the United States, and Russia is the first supplier of wheat to the Middle East and some countries in Africa. So after the Ukraine invasion, there were some logistics and difficulties to keep with normal trade a bit for wheat. And in 2024, this Moscow shipped free grain to Mali, Burkina Faso, Eritrea, Somalia, and the Central African Republic, which is one of the main partners of Russia in Africa. It was around 200,000 wheat tons, the ones that were shipped to these countries. Another big product or good that Russia trades with the world is fertilizers or agrochemicals. For example, Russia represents around 22% of all the agrochemics that Latin America buys. So it's very important because Latin America, especially Russia, Mexico, Argentina, Central American countries are big producers of agricultural products, so they depend on these products. And then we have another big way, another important way in which Russia engaged in the global south, which is the military cooperation and arms sales. For example, in Africa, 32 countries have a military agreement or military cooperation with Russia, and the biggest arms sales partners with Russia in the world are India, China, Egypt, Algeria, Vietnam, Kazakhstan, and Angola. But what information shows is that Russian arms sales around the world have been decreasing for the last 10 years, especially with India, for example. But at the same time, Russia is an important, not the first place or the biggest partner, but Russia is important arms seller for other countries in Africa and in Latin America. In the case of Latin America, the countries that have military cooperation are for sure first place Venezuela, but also Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, El Salvador, Paraguay, and Peru. And in terms of trade, we can see that the amount or trade between Africa, for example, or Latin America is rather small. For example, in 2024, the trade with Russia, of Russia with Africa, it was around 30,000 million USD, which is very low compared to China, European Union, or even the United States, or even intra-region trade between African countries. And in Latin America, for example, the biggest partners are Brazil and Mexico. And we can see the difference. For example, Russia in Latin America has political allies. For example, Venezuela, Cuba, historical ally, Nicaragua, and to a lesser extent, Bolivia. It might change, for example, depending on who is in power in Latin America. Bolivia now has a more conservative, like a center-right government. It was elected a month ago, couple of weeks ago. So it might go closer to the United States rather than China and Russia. The main partners of Russia in terms of trade are Brazil and Mexico. And as you can see here, it's like around 10,000, 11,000 millions, which is very low compared to the main partners or the trade between Mexico and Brazil, for example. So again, to sum up or to wrap up, Russia has been more vocal on the global south in the last couple of years since the invasion of Ukraine, and the need to develop more like logistics corridors for trading, for imports and importing technology, exporting its products, and so it has been more vocal about it. But the relations with countries with the global south has been along with the 21st century. And the main difficulty we can see of how Russia links or works with the global south is that it's lacking resources, or it's lacking an effective strategy to link up with the global south because of its limited resources. So far it has been more vocal, more discursive rather than effective, thinking from the point of the global south. What can the global south get from Russia, right? It's not really a lot of money, but they can cooperate in some specific areas, technical cooperation, capacity building, where Russia has historically been a power in those senses. So far, that is my presentation. Thank you very much.